asked me to tell the truth, and I told the truth. If people are upset with the truth, then they shouldn't have done what they did.
This is a real conspiracy headed up by the devil himself.
Republican House Speaker Rusty Bowers was censured by the leaders of his own party for revealing Donald Trump's pressure campaign to overturn the Arizona vote. Bowers now facing a Trump-endorsed candidate who believes the devil rigged the 2020 election. It's our top primary race to watch. Welcome back to Square Off. We're highlighting the top primaries to watch that are farther down the ballot. Each one tells a story about the state of the Arizona Democratic and Republican parties. The winner of these primaries is guaranteed election in November because those are safe seats. Let's look at the top 3 legislative races. This one will be watched nationally. Donald Trump and the state Republican Party want to end Rusty Bowers' political career. Bowers faces former state Senator David Farnsworth in the Senate primary in the East Valley's District 10. Let's go to Legislative District 5 in Central Phoenix, where 4 incumbent Democrats and 1 former Democratic lawmaker are battling for just 2 House seats. And there's a far-right showdown in the Republican Senate primary in Legislative District 7. Trump-endorsed Wendy Rogers versus Kelly Townsend. The massive district cuts a north-south ribbon through eastern Arizona. And we're back with Julie Erfle and Paul Bentz. Paul, I'll start with you on that Bowers race. Despite what Julie said in the last segment, you have called this a battle for the soul of the Republican Party. Fair enough. What is going on here, and why does Rusty Bowers say he's going to need a miracle to win?
So LD10 is a East Valley district. Mesa Apache Junction is very conservative leaning, a plus 15 or so Republican participation advantage. That's why you call it a safe district. And Rusty Bowers is a longtime elected official, Speaker of the House, very well known, incredibly conservative, it should be noted, but was not willing to go along with some of the election fraud allegations, Trump's efforts to overturn the election, and was willing to speak to the January 6th commission. That apparently, in the eyes of the former president, makes him a bad man. The president called him that from the podium at his speech in Prescott, and certainly has unleashed a significant amount of fury on Bowers. There's some other things that they've been attacking him on, including his willingness to support anti-discrimination legislation and other things that may not be considered so quote-unquote pro-family. But I think Rusty Bowers has stood his ground and served with honor, and that's one of the challenges that they're going to face. Is he's a well-known individual, but they basically have made this their top priority to take him out in this primary.
Will they succeed?
I think it's going to be a close race, but it certainly looks like, based on the early turnout here, he's going to have a lot of trouble in this election.
All right, Julie, let's go to LD5, the Democratic race. 5 accomplished candidates. 3 will lose their jobs. At least 2 will lose their jobs. How did that happen? How did Democrats end up in this free-for-all?
One. So there's 3 incumbents in LD5.
Correct.
3 incumbents in LD5. 1 who hasn't faced an election yet, because that's Sarah Ligori, and she was appointed to fill out Aaron Lieberman's seat when he decided to run for governor back in the old LD28. And the other 2, Brianna Westbrook and Aaron Marquez, they're no stranger to politics or that area really, but they are definitely, I think, maybe considered a little bit more progressive. What's interesting in this race is you do have 3 incumbents, you have 2 more newcomers, and you have no real consensus. You don't have a team running in that district. And if you look at the folks who, the Democratic-leaning organizations that are making endorsements in that district, you don't have consensus there either. There's really no consensus whatsoever, which I think tells you one of 2 things. One, maybe there's just not as much unity among these groups about what they want down at the legislature. But also, too, I think it tells you that if you're on the Democratic side, there's not as much of a purity test on that side as we're seeing in the Republican side, in that you can have more moderate to progressive candidates and still win a legislative seat versus, having to fit just one very narrow role.
Some might argue there is a purity test. Over the last few weeks, there's been a blow-up over the Planned Parenthood endorsement and what that stands for, what that represents. We had the Democratic Party Chair Raquel Taran on this show last week, who made some pretty confusing remarks about whether that's all about defunding the police.
What's interesting, though, is if you listen to those statewide candidates, if you go back and you read the interview, the follow-up interview that was done with Chris Mays, with Katie Hobbs, they said very definitively no. That is absolutely not what I was signing on to. I was not signing on to defund the police. I want to work with public safety. I think Chris Mays in particular was very clear on that. So I think that may be where a few of the groups want to go, but that's not where the Democratic majority in this state is at, and I think that those candidates understand that.
Has that put the Dems in a tough spot?
Well, as much as we focus on the Republican primary, it is interesting. A lot of these Democratic primaries, Democrats are being accused of being too centrist or too moderate or too willing to be partisan, or, you know, if they don't get the Planned Parenthood endorsement, they go out of their way to try to talk about their credentials in that realm. It happens on both sides of the aisle. The Republicans is always a run to the right, and you see in some of these crowded races, there are certainly candidates trying to run to the left. What we've generally seen, though, is that most conservative Republicans have been very successful, but more centrist Democrats have been able to survive some of these challenges.
All right, I do want to point out one more race. County Supervisor District 2, Thomas Galvin, who was appointed to that job. He's running in a special election to serve out the remainder of a 4-year term. He's facing 3 Trumpers who want to get on the county board and maybe have some fun with the election. So something to know, because that's not on most people's radar. Julie Erfle, Paul Bentz, thank you so much for joining us. You've helped me understand what's going to happen Tuesday night a lot better.